On this edition of the Watchmen Brief, our How to Be a Great Public Servant series continues with a very dear friend who's making a big difference in his community. The Watchmen Brief is straight ahead. Stay tuned. And welcome back to another edition of the Watchmen Brief. My name is RC Williams.
And I'm Julianna Ormond.
We are co-founders of Watchmen Action, a nonprofit ministry dedicated to equipping the church to engage the culture and making sure that citizens can move the issues that are most important to them forward in an effective way. Thank you so much for joining us. Our guest today is Jack Hilligoss, and we'll get to him in just a second. Today's show is brought to you by goldback.com. The Florida Goldback Revolution is here, and Watchmen Action has free half goldbacks for you. Here's what we need you to do. Go to goldback.com. Make sure you let them know you're from the state of Florida and let them know that Watchmen Action sent you. Half goldback is coming in the mail to you. The parallel economy revolution is here. Make sure you join it at goldback.com. We are also super excited on the growth for Watchmen Action. Our annual report is out now. The website is getting an upgrade, and our Watchmen Action online community is ready to launch. What we need you to do is go and sign up for the email list today. Just go to watchmenaction.org. That's watchmenaction.org. Get signed up so that you get all the updates. Julianna, exciting today. Let's bring our dear friend from Lake Wales, Florida, Pastor Jack Hilligoss, onto the show. Jack, welcome to the Watchmen Brief.
Hey, thank you. It's good to see you guys again.
Yeah, it's a blessing to see you, my friend. So, we were talking before we started the show today about the importance of this series and finding good quality public servants who are doing their job and really getting an understanding of what the role is supposed to be, and then how people can engage with them. So last week, we had Grant Malloy on, who is the clerk of the court and the comptroller in Seminole County. Jack Hilligoss is the mayor of Lake Wales, Florida, which is in the middle of the state. He is also pastor at HighPoint Church. So you can tell that this segment is going to be great because we have a man that has a strong moral compass who has also decided to step into the political arena in public service to lead. Right. So Jack, again, welcome. Let's give people a bit of background on you.
Okay. Give me specifics, or before I give you any, what would you like to know?
We want to know as much about Jack Hilligoss and how you went from average ordinary citizen, being a shepherd of a church, right, and then ultimately becoming mayor of Lake Wales.
Okay, thanks. I was called to ministry at a very young age. I tell people I was called to be a pastor when I was 18 years old, and I was diagnosed as a politician about 4 years ago. And one was a calling of God, and the other was a necessity, I think, that I felt because of the city that I live in. For most of my life, I'm just your average, normal, run-of-the-mill evangelical conservative pastor. I tell people I was pro-life. I voted conservative, but that's about the limit of my engagement. And of course, most of us that grew up in the church struggle with what is the appropriate role and where are the lines that we draw between faith and politics. And then what happened was 2020 and the COVID pandemic. And I was on my way up to Illinois to perform a funeral for my wife's grandmother. And we were on the interstate when the radio announcement came out. President Trump, we're shutting the country down for 2 weeks to slow the spread. And even as naive and uninformed as I was politically, something in me immediately said, this is not right. This should not be happening in our country. And you all are very familiar with the events that cascaded down after that, where and then I saw it bleed into our local community. And at the same time, during all of that, the summer that followed and all of the riots and unrest and just the avalanche of wokeism and how it began to bleed into our local community. And it had been here for quite a while, but most of us weren't paying attention. And it was like it all just came out in the open. So we had things like, we found out local charter school was running LGBTQ clubs with coming out Fridays and DEI-based extracurricular activities that were privately funded without the knowledge of our school board. And people protesting at police stations, and an atheist club. I didn't even know we had an atheist club in Lake Wales that pressured our commission to have a transgendered atheist to offer the invocation, and just unrelenting pressure on very good servants that were causing our city administration to get bogged down and break down. And a few other events happened, and people were asking me to run. And at first I resisted that, but finally, after a lot of prayer, I decided, okay, I'll put my hat in the ring and see what we can do. I got appointed to a temporary position, and then 8 months later, I ran for the mayor of Lake Wales and won. So that's how I got in.
So, Jack, it's interesting. We met you in early 2022 at the Liberty Pastors Training Camp in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Right.
Our mutual friend Jim McLean is like, "Oh my God, you guys have to meet Jack. He's right down the road from you."
Right.
Little did we know that at the time we met, that one, we would hit it off the way we did. I think we talked for hours
It was fun,
about what was going on. But little did we know that you were also running for mayor.
Yep.
And when you mentioned that, it's like, let's keep an eye on this and see what happens. And so, we're sitting around. Election day comes around. I happen to catch the news that Jack Hilligoss is now the mayor of Lake Wales.
Right. Yeah.
Said, hey, Julianna, Jack won. He won. He's the mayor.
It's crazy.
But it is. But you know what, Jack? It's exciting in the sense that we often talk on this show, and when we do the Culture Crossroads, our TV show, we talk a lot about the church abdicating its role of leadership in the culture. And when people ask, why does it look like this? We say that's the exact reason why. Yeah. So this movement, with what Paul Blair has done with the Liberty Pastors Training Camps, and you being a participant in that, this move towards re-entering that and equipping the church to engage the culture is refreshing to see, and it sends a strong message. So, Jack, with that, let's transition a bit into what your role as mayor of Lake Wales is. Let's give people some nuts and bolts on that role first. And then I'd like for you to talk a little bit about what you've been able to do over the last couple of years as mayor.
Okay. Well, the role, the nuts and bolts role of the mayor of Lake Wales is not all that complicated. Lake Wales is a commissioner manager form of government. So it's kind of a policy governance. The day-to-day operations of the city are in the hands of our city manager. Our job is to set guardrails for him, limiting policy, which would be a budget, and obviously the ordinances and things that we pass. We trust our city staff to handle day-to-day, and then they come to us for approval of actions that they're taking. So it's a weak mayor situation. The only three city employees that answer directly to us are the city manager, the city attorney, and the city clerk. All the rest of the employees answer to the city manager. I don't have any policy making power as the mayor unilaterally. The commission does, but all of the commission has to act on any policy that's enacted. My vote doesn't count any more than any of the other four other members of the commission. My responsibilities are to chair the meetings, make sure that we operate according to the appropriate rules of order. And my secondary role is I am the representative of the city for all ceremonial purposes. If there's a ribbon cutting, if there's a building dedication, my job is to represent the city well in those areas. And I also sign all the legal documents. Once we actually approve something like an annexation or a site plan for a new addition or anything like that, I sign the documents. So that is the nuts and bolts of the position. It's like drinking from a fire hose once you first get elected to figure out, what is the process for annexation and zoning, blah, 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 understanding all of that. But then once you figure out the nuts and bolts of it, it's pretty straightforward. Just do what the law says and you don't have many problems. Now, that's the nuts and bolts.
How did your congregation react to you running? That must have been very interesting.
They actually were very supportive for the most part. Interesting, RC, that you mentioned we met in Little Rock, Arkansas at Paul Blair's Liberty Pastors Conference. And that was extremely helpful to me because I had entered the mayoral race out of a sense of obligation to my citizens, to my friends who were citizens in Lake Wales. There was so much turmoil in our city, but I didn't understand my obligation to my Lord. And
Mm.
and that changed at the Liberty Pastors Conference, and that really solidified my commitment to pursuing this, because if you go to a Liberty Pastors Conference, Paul leads off with that question: what part of your life is Jesus not the Lord of? That's the only
That's
part
right.
you're not allowed to talk about or participate in.
That's
Well,
right.
when I sat through that conference and understood for the first time a political theology, a biblical mandate that we have, then I was able to share that much more. First of all, it solidified my understanding, and then it helped me to share it much more effectively with my congregation. The elders of our church were always supportive of me because they loved me, and I've been here a long time. But I think as I came back with that clearer message, their commitment to the whole thing increased as well. So they've always been there. I've always had the unanimous support of the elders of the church, or I don't think I would have done it.
Well, after we met you, we came to your church and you gave us a massive tour. And I was like, if we had a church like this in all the communities, I mean, you're really engaged. You're in the center and saying, let's do these things. Let's have the homeschool come in. Let's, bring in these different opportunities for people to be able to learn, to grow, to, meet each other.
Right.
Yeah.
All of that was happening. Our church was going through, I was running for office while we were relocating to the new building that I gave you a tour of. So it was quite a bit of chaos in 2022. Good stuff, but very busy. And at that time, then my messages began to change again, because my understanding of our scriptural calling as Christians to be culture influencers, the cultural mandate of God's word,
That's right.
was growing. And I began to preach that, and it's changed the whole dynamic of our church. So it's not just that I ran for mayor, but we started a Salt and Light group in our church, again, out of the Liberty Pastors Conference. We began to teach our people, what is your role as a citizen of Lake Wales, as a Christian citizen of Lake Wales? We started taking them to commission meetings and water commission meetings and introducing them, having their public officials come to the Salt and Light meetings and talk to our people, and encouraging our folks. God may be calling you to run for office. And so we have right now 6 members of our church that have won elected office, either from the county level all the way down to local levels, and another 6 or 8 that have been appointed to various volunteer committees and commissions. So we've gotten very active trying to bring the influence of Christ that way. So it's exciting, but it was a major overhaul. So whenever I talk to pastors and say, you're going to get resistance on the front end, because you're introducing something that evangelical Christians, it was a part of our heritage that we gave away, and we have amnesia about this. So the minute you reintroduce this, understand you're going to get pushback. But once you get through that, you're going to find a very receptive audience of people who are hungry for this kind of leadership.
100%.
Yeah. So Jack, this is a good segue. The fact that you've really created a blueprint, in a sense, to get believers engaged in this process and working so that we retake that territory is important. Since we've known you really your entire first term as mayor of Lake Wales, and as we're doing the show, you're preparing to run again. What have you run into? Like, what have some of the victories been, the hurdles been? Because I think people really need to understand. You provided detail on what your role is, but they need to understand the ups and downs and what happens maybe when you proverbially turn your head and you're not paying attention. So talk to us about the last couple of years.
Well, okay, so I love the way you said that. When you turn your head, lies are aggressive. They don't stay put. And so if you don't engage with the truth, then lies will take over. And I think one of the things that I fell for, and I've shared this often, is that I had this idea that I lived in this little conservative community, and that these things would never come to us. That doesn't happen in Lake Wales. And I was shocked as I began to get engaged in the process at how much it was here and how hostile they were to a Christian with godly convictions wanting to engage, wanting to be a part. It's just not accepted. It's not right. And so there's this idea that we have this truce and everybody's very tolerant of us. but that goes the way the minute you actually try to exert some level of influence, or even just be a legitimate part of the process. So I would tell people who are out there that have an idea that these things are not happening, they are. And if you look around, you'll find out that they're in your schools, that humanist or liberals only cathedral is the commission chamber. So they live, that's where they live, that's where they worship. And I learned that as I got engaged. The other thing that then was eye-opening to me, and we shared about the nuts and bolts role of a mayor. And I've told many people that I've spoken to, there are a lot of folks that are qualified to be a mayor just on a competence level. Especially of a small city that has a very good city manager. There are a lot of people that could do that. But the more important thing is the messaging, the representation, I think the morality. You create an atmosphere in the city. And so as the mayor of Lake Wales, I'll give you just one example. I'm the only one that can approve a proclamation to be read in our city commission chambers. Well, in 2018, the city of Lake Wales began reading the Pride Proclamation. Nobody paid any attention. It happened. Nobody in our city knew it was because nobody pays any attention. And that led to next a transgendered atheist being asked to pray the invocation in our city commission chambers. And all of these things are important because they're sending a message about, and I think they're opening the door spiritually to things to happen in your city. So I was elected in April of 2022, and June came around pretty quickly, and the request for the Pride Proclamation came, and I refused to read it. And that caused quite a firestorm. The commission chambers was packed for the first time ever. And we went through a real struggle there, but here we are 3 years later, we're still not reading it. Last year, nobody came to protest not reading it. And last year, 15 of 17 municipalities in Polk County refused to read the proclamation, as well as our city commission, or as well as our county commission and our county school board refused to read it. And all of them were doing that. And it had happened because nobody stood up and just said, no, this is not right. This is not the kind of community we want to be. So that to me has been the greater impact that I've had, just to be able to actually get people to think about the morality of our city, which but whether you like it or not, a city has a morality, and the people in charge set the pace for that.
Wow. That was so like, people don't think about that and the importance of setting the morality of the area. So
I just shared with a group, and we've experienced this in our country. Morality is tied to competence. And when immoral people are in charge, pretty soon you will have incompetence. God's truth is true about everything. It affects everything. And when you live in the denial of God's truth, eventually that bleeds down into incompetence. What we saw in the last 4 years with our national government is an example. When you have an extremely immoral administration, eventually that will turn into an extremely incompetent administration. Same thing for cities.
Very true. Very true. So Jack, you know, the difference that you were able to make by taking a stand. So you are one mayor in, as you described, a small town that said, I will not read this. And the result of that, it's like people were waiting for someone to just stand up and say something. So looking through that lens, let's talk a bit about how citizens in your eyes can get things done. So I'll set the stage, and then you can provide us some feedback on how people can be effective in helping folks like yourself and city commissions to do things. Our friends Scott and Jill Kiley, who are down in Marco Island, have really been pushing hard to get fluoride out of the water, right? And they've had some traction, right? State of Florida, Joseph Ladapo, our Surgeon General, has made a move. And one of the things that they shared with us is that why stuff like that is allowed to happen is simply a lack of knowledge or education of the city commissioners or even the mayors of why it's a problem. And when they presented that to them and said, hey, look, it's poison, here's the listing, they would say, I had no idea. Thank you for educating me. What else do I need to know?
Right.
So Jack, through that lens, if someone in Lake Wales or any other city across the United States wants to move an initiative forward, how are they best to come to the commissioners or to you as a mayor? Like what needs to happen to get you up to speed so that meaningful change can take place?
I think what you described is the perfect way to go about it. Storming the commission chambers and screaming out for 3 minutes into a microphone may be cathartic for you, but it's not effective. And it really paints commissioners into a corner, a really uncomfortable corner. It creates an adversarial relationship too quickly. Here's what I would tell most people. All of our city commissioners, including myself, have full-time jobs. And we, just like you, we work 40, 50 hours a week. We don't have time we trust our administration to handle a lot of the detail work. So we're not up to speed on a lot of things. So if you want us to, be an ally in a cause, then what you described is the best way. Have a personal conversation and go to them and hey, I want to help you. This is a valid concern. Have your facts in order, present your case well, and make sure that they understand you're not trying to Shanghai them or you're not trying to just grandstand them in public, but you're really appealing to them as a representative and giving them the information they need. Then once you've had those kind of conversations, then the next step is to come and make some sort of presentation to your city commissioners in an orderly, respectful, but in a way that they see that there's a real momentum behind this, that there are a lot of people, and I think the more authoritative voices you can bring to the table, the better. And that's the good way to get started. It gives those folks some reason for standing up for what you're asking for. Because Joe, who runs the hardware store and has seat number 3 on the city commission, I promise you he's not reading about fluoride in the water. So you're going to have to help him that way.
This understanding, Jack, is powerful because what you described is what Scott and Jill have run into. So It is great to hear it from a public servant from that side of the table. And we found this, as Juliana mentioned earlier with Dr. Latipo, that he wants to be educated. He's like, I need for you to tell me what's going on so that I have a clue so that I can help you or we can steer this thing in the right direction. I think it's incredibly powerful when we have these conversations and it comes from you, because I think the other part of it, and this is tough, is that people are quick to either minimize someone or deify them in those roles of leadership, instead of understanding, right, that Mayor Hilligoss is also a pastor and a father and everything. He's human, right? And is willing to listen. If you come and present a case that makes sense, he'll take the time to sit with you and try to understand where you're coming from. I think some of that gets lost when you've got chaos going on all around you. So it's really good to hear this
I think
from that perspective.
I'm sorry, RC. I think the other thing too is that's the way Christians should behave. Truth doesn't have to scream at people. Truth doesn't have to behave like that. The people that come and scream at me, my first reaction, first of all, like any human being, is to become adversarial with them and defensive with them. But my next question is, the next thought in my mind is, why, if you have such a strong case and a reason for what you're doing, why do you have to do it this way? So I'll give you an example of here in Lake Wales. 2 years ago, we had a very large manufacturer who wanted to develop a 100-acre site in our city. It was great for our city on so many levels: employment, income, all of these things. And there a group of people who consistently oppose everything that we do in the city. They got together, neighborhood meetings. They spread false information about the impacts. They stormed the commission chamber with all of these people that they had riled up. And when I see that kind of behavior, and I invited them from the dais, I asked them to come and sit with me in my office. I've done it more than once, and they refuse to do that. Their action is, go spread rumors, go work people up and storm the commission. That's not the way that we operate. It's not really effective, not on people that have integrity. And you really don't want folks sitting on your commission that can be changed by that kind of behavior. You want the kind of people you can have good conversations with.
Yeah. See, Jack, that part too is important. This goes back to the moral compass and the quality of person. You deciding that taking back this territory and having the good moral compass in place, obviously we see the impacts of that as more and more people who are believers or Christians are stepping up and taking on these roles.
Right.
It's so important that people understand that. And one of the things we said through this election cycle, because you had the top of the ticket where Trump did extremely well, but in a lot of places down ballot, conservatives did not do well.
Right.
And people are wondering even why, Trump had this case against him and Mershon wouldn't drop it, right? We told people, we said, if you don't think elections at all levels have consequences, ask yourself how Juan Mershon ended up in office.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Either he was elected or he was appointed by someone who was elected.
Right. Right.
Those things matter.
Yeah. Local. So you're touching on, again, I just gave this speech and I shared with our folks that the city of Lake Wales has a little less than 10,000 eligible voters that can vote in a municipal election. And in most of our municipal elections, less than 2,500 actually vote. In our last city election last spring, we had one seat that was decided by 4 votes. It was 1 vote on election night, and we had to go through a review, and we nearly lost a very good and effective commissioner to a young man who seems like a decent young man, but he's totally unqualified to be in that position. And we had another commissioner in seat 4 that was overwhelmingly defeated by a person who's not as qualified to be in that seat, in my opinion. How does that happen? So what I showed them is that while the city of Lake Wales in general is very conservative in their voting patterns, most of what is in our mailing address is not within the city limits and can't vote in municipal issues. And when you look within the city limits, there's this little blue dot, and 63% of them voted Democrat in the last election.
Wow.
Okay, the people that voted are more liberal in their leanings because our conservative base does not get engaged in the local municipal elections. So for years, a lot has been allowed to take root in our little city because people who love the Lord and are conservative simply didn't pay attention to municipal elections, which are the most critical elections to their lives. So we've worked really hard at HighPoint, and a lot of other churches now are joining us to get their people to register and vote in local municipal elections.
Jack, so a transition to the church, we've talked about everything that you do, but HighPoint is such a great story, and you've done so much over the last few years. Just give people a bit of background on where you came from and all the great stuff that's going on now, because you've got the school and everything like that.
Sure. Yeah. So my line is, we were always, like I said, I was a typical evangelical pastor, but I was pro-life conservative, but I never talked about those things. And we were very engaged in our community, but we did stuff like, painted libraries and did food drives. It's the kind of stuff that will applaud you for, but they won't throw stones at you for. And then that awakening began to happen, and I began to understand, read the Word of God. I got exposed to people like Paul Blair, and through him to a lot of other men who teach about the kingdom mandate, the biblical cultural mandate for the church. And I began to understand that God has given his church the keys to the kingdom. And every local church is an embassy of the kingdom of God in your community. And your job is to bring the influence of Christ into every sphere of that city. That means the education, the government, the arts, the media, business. You need to be trying to find some way to intentionally influence those parts of your culture. So we began to try and do that. And the first big foray for us was me running for office. And like I said, we started the Salt and Light group every year for between Memorial Day and July 4th. We do 6 weeks on God and government. What does the scripture teach us about the government, because Christians have no idea how much of our country, of the United States of America, is founded on biblical principles. And then the next thing, to me, I tell people that education is discipleship. And when you're working in government, you're building a moat. But when you're working in education, you're changing generations. That's the long game. That's the little yeast that leavens the whole loaf. So we tell our folks, you take back responsibility for the education of your kids. You change generations. So we had all, for a long time, had a desire to start a private school. And when Governor DeSantis signed the HB1 bill, he opened the floodgates for us. And we launched Providence Academy. We already had 2 homeschooling groups with 40 families that we allow to use our facilities, and they still meet here. But then we opened Providence Academy, and now we're up to 6th grade, pre-K to 6th grade, have 174 students. And we're opening 7th grade next year. We have a waiting list of well over 100 trying to get in. We bring these kids in. It's Christ-centered. They start every day at chapel, pledge to the flag, pledge to the Christian flag, pledge to the Bible, worship, and some sort of biblical principle is taught before they go into their school day. The parents are welcome to come, and many of them do. Mm-hmm. When we began the school, 37% of the families were not churched. Many of those families are worshiping with us now. And in the first year of the school, we did a chapel towards the end of the first semester where we offered the kids an opportunity with parental permission to be baptized. And we baptized 34 students and 1 staff member in a chapel service at our church. So we're seeing not salvation, but on top of that, I tell people, I watch those kids march into chapel, and I pray over them. God, which one of them is going to be the president of the United States? Mm-hmm. I see business leaders, and I see, senators, and I see presidents, and there's really in the state of Florida no excuse right now except know-how for you not to start a school. And I think if you want to change the United States of America 25 years from now, start a school now.
Jack, incredibly powerful. Juliana, go ahead.
I was going to say, I can't even talk, like I'm totally choked up crying over here, because that's how you save. I was a kid in Brooklyn, and if there was a Providence, I needed a Providence. Yeah. I'm so thrilled and honored that you did all of that, because my heartbeat is for the kids.
Yeah.
We need to make it better for the kids. What you're talking about is real change.
Yeah.
And it starts with them.
Yeah.
I have my grandson a couple of days a week because he's never going to be, in public school or with a nanny outside of me or, family.
Right.
That's so important to us. We've sacrificed the children at this point.
Yeah.
And I appreciate what you've done.
Yeah. Well, and I fell for that. The reason I'm so passionate about it is because I was raised in that lie of separation of church and state, and I bought it for a long time. And if there was one thing I've repented for and asked for forgiveness for, and if I could change it, I would. I wouldn't have let my oldest daughter or my only daughter go through public school. And we had a real struggle. Now, praise God that he's working, and, she's doing really well right now. But so much that she was exposed to, and it was carelessness on our part because we trusted a system we shouldn't have trusted.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get back to the 1950s and 60s when the church was the center of the community, center of the family, center of everything, morality, and what was going on in our government. Yeah. That's where we need to get back to. And that's why what you've done has been so substantial.
We've abdicated so much. And I tell people we've taken these big black theological crowns, and we've drawn lines around. We've let the world draw lines around where we'll allow Jesus to go, as if the whole world doesn't belong to him. And I call it, we've made ghettos for Jesus. Churches are ghettos for Jesus today.
Wow.
And not kingdom embassies. And you're right. I love the way you say it. The church ought to be the center, the heartbeat of every community.
That's right.
Jack, this has been powerful. It's like every time we talk, there's massive movement, right? But this in particular has been powerful, and the legacy that it will have in educating people of any age on what's going on, what they should be doing, and how they should engage. We can't put words to it. We thank you for joining us on the show. Before we jump off, how can people get in touch with you if they have questions or they want to learn more about HighPoint?
They can reach out to me at jack@highpointlw.com. And I'm on that all the time. And I'm glad to share whatever I can. So if there's any question they have, by the way, and I'd love to hear from them if they have suggestions, because we're building this bridge as we walk on it. And but I love to talk to anybody who has a heart to make a difference or is making a difference. So if they email me, I promise you I will be back in touch.
Jack, thank you again so much. For Julianna Ormond and our guest, Jack Hilligoss, I'm RC Williams. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Watchmen Brief. We'll see you soon.